Hello, hello! We're back here on something new with an episode titled The Gravity of Infatuation. I'm Professor Placebo, expert in psychology, and I'm here with
Dr. Dogood, professor in ethics.
Sir Will Mitochondria, I've got a PhD.
And he's the powerhouse of our podcast. Today we will be discussing Venereum Gravitas, or the desire to spend every moment with your romantic partner.
Venereum Gravitas actually has the Latin roots of gravity and romance, and that's the name of the game today. We're going to be talking about the gravity or the obsessive pull that romance can have on us sometimes.
At the beginning of romantic relationships, people often find themselves infatuated with their significant others, which leads for them to want to be around them all the time. This type of obsession either fosters the growth of love or terminates the relationship as the two people become used to each other and the passion fizzles out.
Now you might be thinking, why is this a problem? Well, the fact that you're thinking that is why it's a problem. People of society today too readily accept this emotion as something that's good and something that can drive a romantic relationship. We argue that that's not the case. In fact, we argue that this emotion has so many underlying consequences that people don't consider. We hope that through the use of this word, people will start to think critically about this emotion and bring to light some of the dangers that everyone doesn't seem to want to realize.
So, in order to address this, we're, as usual, going to cover it through the lens of biology,
psychology,
and ethics.
Let's get to it. So the first thing you need to know about infatuation is that it isn't just another name for love, right? There are scientific differences between it and the other forms that romance can take, and multiple experiments have shown that infatuated people have heightened levels of brain activation in places that produce dopamine especially.
Wait, dopamine's like associated with happiness and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
So,
got it. Oh, that makes sense. When you, fall in love with someone, you're happy. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they can even be shown to produce stress-relieving chemicals, too. So it really shows that people who are infatuated get a lot chemically out of being with and interacting with their partner. It's clearly different than other forms of love biologically.
So would you say that basically when you're infatuated, you're, high, in a sense?
Almost, yeah. It's definitely a enforced different mood or a set of influences than normal.
Oh, okay, got it. So then I guess that makes sense when you talk about why people are so obsessed with love is because they're so obsessed with the feeling, but the feeling is created by the brain chemistry, so that's what you're getting at, right?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, people often compare infatuation and obsession, but that's not just an observational thing, it's also biological. And they share a lot of traits. And they have shown through more studies that infatuated people and obsessed people also have increased reception to serotonin, which is a drug that in your brain, or a chemical in your brain, which is greatly impactful upon your mood balance, which explains a lot about why infatuated people tend to have, very drastic emotions about things. And this chemical is also related to depression in lower levels. So if you're more receptive to how much of this chemical you have, then it makes sense that your mood would swing a lot.
Okay, so tying psychology into this, what personality type do you think is most likely to experience this obsessive infatuation?
I definitely think that extroverts are more likely to need or rely upon Venereum Gravitas, and probably more capable of handling it than introverts are. And this is because extroverts, actually, even though they produce similar or the same amounts of dopamine as introverts, they need more of it to stimulate the system the same way that introverts do. So Venereum Gravitas could potentially and is likely to be a source of that extra stimulus, that extra dopamine release, as we discussed earlier, along with serotonin and even stress-relieving chemicals. This is all stuff that extroverts need to stimulate their system more than introverts do. And indeed, introverts actually might find it too much to have all this extra stimulus coming in. I think extroverts are definitely likely to be the recipients of Venereum gravitas.
Would you say that it's kind of hard to tell, though, because they can vary from person to person, or is it like...
Of course, this is a broad overgeneralization. I'm sure almost anyone can feel this emotion depending on the scenario, but in general, I would say extroverts would trend towards being the more afflicted by Venereum gravitas.
So in the last segment, we outlined how your personality type makes you more susceptible to changes in brain chemistry, but I'd argue that your past creates your personality type. Am I on the right track with that?
Yes, this is really true. So while the biological aspects of Venereum gravitas are important, we should also analyze the psychological aspects of this feeling. So hello, I am Professor Placebo. I have a PhD in psychology. I sometimes work as a psychologist, and what I've noticed is that many people think that Venereum gravitas is something that is idealized in movies and in pop culture, but in reality, I've seen many patients who exhibit this feeling. So I'm going to insert here a little clip of an interview I had with a teenage girl recently who is exhibiting symptoms of Venereum gravitas. Hi McKenna, how are you feeling today?
I'm okay. I'm just a little sad. Like, that's why I came in. Like, my boyfriend, he canceled plans to hang out with me because of his best friend's birthday or something like that. I don't really know. I wasn't really listening, but, like, doesn't he understand, like, I'm the center of his world? Like, he's the center of mine. Shouldn't it be a two-way streak, or is that, like, an issue, or, like, what?
I think that you might be experiencing Venereum gravitas.
What? What's that?
So Venereum gravitas is basically a feeling where you always want to be around someone that you love, and you always want to spend every second with them, even if you shouldn't.
Even if I shouldn't. Okay. But, like, I've been dating him for, like, 2 years. That kind of sounds like something you'd see at the beginning of a relationship. Like, we're not at the beginning of our relationship, so I'm a little confused. How does that apply to me?
Yes, it is something that is usually seen at the beginning of a relationship. Can you tell me a little bit more about some other relationships in your life, like maybe your family?
My family? Well, my parents worked a lot, so they were never really there. I kind of wished we had a better relationship, but, I mean, I didn't really want to get in the way of anything. I kind of looked for emotional support in other people, like teachers, a lot of friends, but my boyfriend's the huge source for emotional support for me.
Do you feel like you ever received that emotional support from your teachers and friends?
Kind of. I mean, I'm not, like, sad and depressed all the time, so I had to have gotten something out of it, right?
So, what did you guys think of this interview?
I thought it was pretty crazy that just off, one little thing, she went so berserk.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you can see, she was going through some pretty severe symptoms of Venereum gravitas over such a small event. So we heard her talking about how she never had a secure connection with her parents. So oftentimes people who are experiencing Venereum gravitas use their significant other to fill this void of validation and insecure attachment that their parents have given them because they never felt a strong relationship with them. Since one's relationship with their parents is their first relationship, if children aren't secure in that, they'll often seek insecure attachments to their partners in the future.
So, do you think that past relationships affect your current ones and your susceptibility to Venereum gravitas?
Yes, definitely. So many past relationships that can exhibit this obsessive love can traumatize individuals because they'll go into future relationships expecting it to be codependent just like their past relationships, which in itself is very unhealthy.
So I'm just curious about what these future relationships look like. Like, what are the characteristics of it?
So since Venereum gravitas is not a mutual feeling, as we know, one person in the relationship will constantly want to be around the other person, and the other person will exhibit a healthy attachment and will only want to be around them at a normal amount of time. And so the one who's exhibiting this healthy attachment will feel suffocated and trapped and will start to resent their partner, while the other person who constantly wants to be around them will have this fear of being abandoned.
So what would happen if Venereum gravitas was mutual between two people?
I would argue that might be kind of like the perfect storm. Both people, feeding each other's needs.
Well, maybe not. So while, you may think it would be the perfect storm, those two people are always going to be looking at each other for fulfillment and looking at each other to meet each other's needs, but they'll keep looking and they'll never be fully satisfied. Additionally, since they always want to be around each other, they're really going to lack a lot of other personal relationships that are important. such as love from their family, love from their friends, and they're only going to be focusing on each other. And so, as you can see, the way you grew up and the relationships you've had can play a huge role in how you approach future relationships and your tendency to experience Venereum Gravitas.
The next segment of our podcast will discuss the ethicality of Venereum Gravitas. As an expert in ethics, I think that Venereum Gravitas is unethical because it creates faulty priorities, or allows for the creation of faulty priorities. Now, what does that mean? When you're in a relationship, it needs to be healthy in order for it to be good. And we define healthy relationships based on a balance of the different kinds of love present and an equality in power dynamics. Power dynamics, like, in the sense that you have as much pull on your partner as your partner has on you. And then the balances of love, meaning the balance between self-love and partner love. When we begin to experience Venereum Gravitas, we have the potential to neglect one of these forms of love. Neglecting self-love means we fail to monitor our own emotional well-beings, and that is showcased in our lack of consideration towards our own expectations or needs from the relationship, simply in favor of our partner and what we believe that their wants and needs are. All in all, we can't flourish in that kind of environment where we only have our partners at the center of our world and we don't consider ourselves. We will just become exhausted by lack of fulfillment because we failed to orient ourselves and our actions in pursuit of the type of emotional support or fulfillment that we need, and it just becomes really dangerous and really self-destructive, in a sense. However, the flip side is true where we fail to recognize the importance of partner love and favor self-love over partner love. And what this will look like is you become so obsessed with your partner that you don't consider their boundaries or expectations of the relationship, and this can cause us to take on very obsessive behaviors where they are the center of our worlds, but more importantly they are there simply to serve us, and that creates a complete unequal power dynamics because it places it in your favor to where you are a dictator in the relationship when it needs to actually be shared equal. And in terms of power dynamics and bringing it back to the self-love aspect, when you give your partner all that power and you put them on that pedestal, put them at the center of your world, the relationship favors them and it neglects or has the potential to neglect you. And so that shifts the power dynamics in their favor. And where unequal power dynamics exist, love can't grow.
So, can these harmful effects be seen outside of a romantic relationship?
Oh, absolutely. It can affect community, Venereum Gravitas, people who are experiencing that. But you say community, and that's like a really broad sense because, like, is it your neighbors? Is it your parents? Is it whatever? I'm focusing mainly on how it affects your friends. When we begin to focus on our significant others and we put them at the center of our world, like Venereum Gravitas makes us or allows us to do, we forget that we owe things to other people as well as our significant other. And so what that's to say is that we can hurt or neglect our friends by not remembering or keeping in mind the responsibilities that we have towards them, to be a good friend, to be there for them if they need us, to make time for them, because Venereum Gravitas in its obsession makes us want to spend all of our time with our significant other, and weirdly enough, we forget that people exist outside of them. And so I think that in summary, Venereum Gravitas is unethical because it allows us to create faulty priorities, and it really messes with us. At the end of last week's episode, we asked our listeners if they had any personal experiences with losing friends because of relationships. This one in particular stood out from the rest. All the way from Seattle, Washington, Noelle Yamamoto writes,
When I was 17, I lost one of my closest friendships because of a relationship. I met this guy my junior year of high school, and I let everything get out of control. At the very beginning, it was a few dates here and there, but in about 2 weeks' time, he was all I could think about. At any given moment, I was either talking to him or talking about him, and I know, I sound obsessed, but he was just as crazy about me, I promise. I didn't even realize that my friends and I were drifting apart. I guess I was just too focused on the guy and everything I could give him. I forgot about my friends and my responsibilities to them. We inevitably broke up about 8 months later, but by then, the damage had already been done. While my friends were there to pick me up after I crashed, I felt like they weren't as concerned for me as they should be. Like they were supporting me because they felt like they had to, not because they wanted to. After I started to regain my composure, my friends started to drift farther away from me. We would hang out, but it wasn't the same as before. My friends had inside jokes I wasn't a part of, stories I wasn't present for, and had basically figured out how to function without me. It was like I didn't even exist. I got so fed up with the way they were acting that I called them out on it. I thought they would realize how selfish they were being by excluding me. It didn't go like I thought it would. Basically, my friends told me that I really had some balls calling them out on excluding me when I was very quick to cut them from my life once my ex came into the picture. They told me I became cold and pissy and all around rude when I was dating that guy. Not that he was a bad influence, my infatuation with him made me narrow-minded and inconsiderate. Long story short, other mean things were said and none of us could really get past it. At the same time, I was angry and felt that they just didn't understand, but looking back, it really was my fault. Had I not put so much time into my then boyfriend, there would have never been any strain on our relationship in the first place. The three of them are still friends. I see their posts on Instagram and I think about what could have been. Maybe if I had taken that trip to Cancun last summer and posed in my swimsuit on that boat with them, or filled that last seat in their car when they drove 3 hours to a coffee shop and had the best lavender vanilla iced coffee on the planet. But I wasn't there for any of those. I was at home or with my new friends. I'm not bitter. I'm happy that they were able to stick together, but I'd be lying if I said their words didn't sting even 5 years later. I think it's really great that you guys are addressing this topic, and I can't wait to listen in.
So, this naturally leads to the question, is Venereum Gravitas, in your opinion, always an unethical emotion? Does it always lead to an unethical outcome?
I don't know. I mean, I really went back and forth about this when we decided that we were going to discuss this, and I think it's pretty individualistic. I'm not really sure the limitations to the ethicality of this. It's really vague. What do you think?
Well, of course, it's per situation as with everything, but I think that in limited scenarios where it's not overindulged, this can be chemically healthy for people who need that extra stimuli to be happy. Whether or not this is ethical or
psychologically
maintainable
correct,
psychologically in the long term, whether it'll make you happy, I'm not sure. But biologically, in the short term, for people who need that positive feedback, this can definitely give you that.
I would say that one reason that it could be unethical is because of how much it's been romanticized through pop culture and media. So many movies and TV shows will portray this obsessive love as like a romantic gesture.
Like idealist.
Yeah. But in reality, it's a scary thing and it really shouldn't be glorified.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know. I guess that brings back to like what Will was saying, like that type of like situational. I think maybe in moderation, this is a good thing because if you can use it to enhance the relationship, get it to make you really appreciate the person that you're with. I think that it has the ability to be beneficial. But the moment that it starts to border on that like obsessive behavior to where you start neglecting yourself or your partner, I think then that's when it becomes an issue and is rendered unethical.
Thanks so much for tuning into our podcast. We hope you all learned something new about this word and its consequences.
In order to help us address these consequences, we hope that you all will add Venereum Gravitas to your own personal vocabularies.
Because after all, if you can define it, you can fix it. Tune in next week to our next podcast titled Coping with Finals.
In Something New,
where biology, psychology, and ethics overlap. This podcast was brought to you by Victoria's Secret, a company that profits off of the intimacy in romantic relationships. If you want to heighten the aesthetic impact of intimacy in your relationship, love pink.
While the sun's away.